It was just after midnight when I started driving back home. I had been visiting a friend in another city, and I left later than I planned. The drive was supposed to take around 3 hours, and most of it was through long stretches of open highway with nothing but farmland and forest on both sides. I didn't think much of it at first. I liked driving at night. The roads were quiet, and it always felt easier to focus when there weren't cars cutting in and out of lanes. But that night, something about the road felt different. The silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like something waiting. The air was cool, the kind of cold that seeps in through the cracks even when the windows are shut. I could hear the low hum of the tires against the asphalt and the faint rattle of loose coins in the cup holder. My headlights stretched out ahead of me in a pale tunnel of light. Everything beyond that was just darkness. No other cars, no lights, no movement, just the endless line of road disappearing into blackness. After an hour, I noticed I hadn't seen a single gas station since leaving the city. The gauge was just above a quarter tank, and I started to feel that quiet kind of worry that grows the longer you ignore it. I told myself it would be fine. I'd make it to the next town. There had to be one eventually. I adjusted my seat and kept going. At some point, I started to feel like something was off with my car. It wasn't anything obvious, just small things. A faint vibration through the steering wheel. A subtle shift in the way it handled. I told myself it was probably the road. It looked smooth under the headlights, but it was the kind of highway that hadn't been resurfaced in a long time. The asphalt had cracks and patches, and it was uneven in places. But the feeling got worse. I could hear something, a low, rhythmic noise that matched the speed of the tires. Like a faint thumping sound, soft but steady. I turned off the radio and rolled the window down a little to listen. The cold air rushed in, and the sound got louder. A deep, dull thud repeating every few seconds. I thought it might be a flat tire or something stuck under the car. I slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder. The road was completely empty. My headlights lit up a narrow strip of gravel and the faint white line running alongside it. When I stepped out, the cold hit me immediately. It was the kind of silence that almost felt physical, like the air itself was holding its breath. I walked around to check the tires. The front ones looked fine. The back left looked a little low, but not flat. I crouched to get a closer look, running my hand over the rubber. That's when I noticed something shiny stuck near the tread. It was a small nail wedged deep, not enough to deflate it yet, but enough to cause that noise. I cursed quietly under my breath. I didn't have a spare tire, at least not one that was in good shape. I had a small repair kit and an air pump in the trunk. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. I set up the small pump and tried to patch it as best I could in the dim glow of my headlights. As I worked, I kept glancing up and down the road. Every time I looked, it was just blackness. But something about it felt heavy, like something could appear at any second. The light from my car barely reached 10 feet beyond me, and everything outside that light felt alive. I could hear small rustles from the trees far off. Maybe animals, maybe just wind, but every noise made my chest tighten. It took me about 15 minutes to patch the tire enough to hold air. My fingers were numb from the cold by the time I finished. I climbed back into the driver's seat, shut the door, and locked it. My heart was still pounding faster than it should have been. I started the car, turned the heater on, and pulled back onto the highway. The road stretched out again, empty as before, but I couldn't shake that tense feeling. I kept checking my mirrors even though I knew there was nothing behind me. Every time I looked, I half expected to see something. Headlights, a figure, anything, but there was only darkness. I drove for another 20 minutes before I saw something ahead. At first, it looked like a flickering light, maybe another car's hazard lights. As I got closer, I realized it was a vehicle pulled over on the side of the road. Its back lights blinked weakly. The car looked old, maybe a late 90s sedan, covered in dust and dirt. I slowed down a little as I approached, unsure if I should stop. I didn't see anyone standing outside. The windows were too dark to see through. For a moment, I thought about pulling over to check if they needed help, but something about it felt wrong. The car looked abandoned. The way it sat slightly tilted, one tire completely flat, and the way the back door on the driver's side was slightly open, it gave me a feeling I can't really explain. just bad. Like the air around it didn't belong. I passed it slowly and watched it shrink in my mirror. That's when I saw movement. A shape, someone, emerged from behind the car and started walking toward the road. I couldn't see any details, just the outline of a person. I didn't slow down. I pressed harder on the gas. When I glanced back again, the figure was standing near the white line at the edge of the road, watching my car until the darkness swallowed it. I drove faster after that. I didn't care about the tire or the gas or the road. My hands were gripping the wheel so hard they ached. I kept checking the mirror again and again, but there was nothing. The road was straight for miles, and still I couldn't see anything following me. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station about an hour later. It was small, the kind that's open all night but feels deserted anyway. One car was parked near the store, empty, and the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. I pulled in, filled up the tank, and went inside to stretch my legs and use the restroom. The man behind the counter looked half asleep, flipping through a small notebook, but I didn't say anything. I just grabbed a bottle of water, paid, and went back outside. That's when I noticed something strange. On the lower side of my rear bumper, near the tire I had patched, there were marks. They looked like faint handprints, smudged, almost like someone had touched the car with dirty fingers. My first thought was that I had brushed against something while fixing the tire, but when I looked closer, I saw they were larger than my hands. Long smears of grime, reaching up slightly, like someone had been crouched low behind the car and pressed their hands there. I just stared at them for a long moment. The realization hit me slow, like a drop of cold water spreading down my spine. I had been out there, kneeling by that tire in the dark, completely exposed. The woods had been close enough that someone could have been there the whole time, watching me, waiting. I replayed everything in my head. The sounds, the feeling of being watched, the rustling I had ignored. I had assumed it was animals, but those prints weren't old. They were fresh. I wiped them off with a paper towel and tried to convince myself that maybe they were from earlier. Maybe something had brushed against the car when I parked before. But deep down, I knew they weren't. The dirt was dry and light, and the prints were smeared like someone had pushed against the metal recently. I finished the drive home without stopping again. The whole way, I kept glancing at the mirrors, expecting to see headlights or someone in the back seat, even though I knew it was impossible. Every sound the car made felt louder. Every shadow that moved across the road made me tense. When I finally reached home, it was nearly 4 in the morning. I parked, shut off the engine, and sat there in silence, letting the quiet swallow the sound of the road. I checked the car again in the morning. The tire was fine. The marks were gone. Everything looked normal. But that drive stuck with me. I realized how easy it is to think you're alone out there when you really might not be. How the dark hides everything you don't notice until it's too late. Every time I drive at night now, I make sure the gas tank is full, the tires are good, and I never stop unless it's somewhere with lights and people. Because that night, on that empty stretch of road, someone was out there. Maybe they were just watching. Maybe they were waiting for the right moment. I'll never know. But I can still picture those faint handprints on the car, and I know one thing for sure. If I had stayed there just a little longer, I probably wouldn't have made it back. It was around 1 o'clock in the morning when I got on the road that night. I had spent the whole day helping my cousin move into his new place 2 hours away, and by the time we finished, it was too late to stay over. I decided to make the drive home instead of sleeping on his couch. The sky was moonless, the air cold, and the road ahead of me was almost completely empty. I didn't feel tired yet, just that quiet kind of calm that comes with driving alone late at night. For the first half hour, everything felt normal. The city lights faded behind me until all that was left were the dull yellow lines in the middle of the highway and the glow of my headlights stretching into the darkness. The sound of the tires on the pavement was steady and smooth. I had the radio turned down low, just enough to fill the silence. The road ahead ran straight for miles, passing through farmland and patches of forest. There were no houses, no signs of life, just black fields and the occasional distant tree line. I checked my gas gauge and saw it was a little under half. It was fine for the distance I had left, but I decided I'd stop at the next gas station I saw, just to be safe. But as the miles went by, I realized there weren't any stations out there at all. Every exit I passed led to more dark stretches of road. I wasn't too worried at first, but that started to change as the night dragged on. About an hour into the drive, I noticed something strange ahead. A car on the side of the road with its trunk open. I slowed a little as I got closer. The car was an old silver sedan, parked halfway on the shoulder, one of its rear tires flat. Its hazard lights were blinking weakly, the orange flashes cutting through the dark. The driver's door was open, but I didn't see anyone standing near it. As I passed, I looked out my window, expecting to see someone by the trunk, maybe trying to change the tire, but there was no one. The inside of the car looked empty. I could see a jacket draped over the driver's seat and a faint glow from a phone sitting in the console, the screen lighting up every few seconds like it was receiving notifications. Something about that image stuck in my head, the car sitting there abandoned with its lights blinking into the night. I kept driving, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about it. Who leaves their car like that in the middle of nowhere with the door open and the trunk up? I tried not to overthink it. Maybe someone had gone to get help. Still, for the next few miles, I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see something. The highway curved gently through a patch of forest, and that's when I noticed headlights appear behind me. They were distant at first, just two faint white dots, but they were getting closer. I didn't think much of it until I realized how fast they were gaining on me. Within minutes, they were close enough to light up my interior with their glare. I thought the driver would pass me, but they didn't. They stayed right behind me, a few car lengths back, moving perfectly in sync with my speed. I eased off the gas a little to see what they'd do. The headlights behind me slowed too. I pressed down again, speeding up, and they matched that too. It didn't feel random anymore. My chest started to tighten. I told myself it was just another driver who didn't like being alone on a dark road and wanted to follow someone's taillights. But it didn't feel like that. It felt deliberate. I drove like that for another 10 minutes, those headlights staying locked behind me. Never too close, never far enough away. I couldn't make out the car's shape, just the glare of its high beams burning into my mirror. The silence inside my car was suffocating now. Even the radio seemed too loud, so I turned it off. The road eventually split into two lanes, and I moved to the right, hoping the driver would go around. They didn't. They stayed behind me. I moved into the left lane again, and so did they. I knew then that it wasn't coincidence. I gripped the steering wheel tighter and tried to think of what to do. I couldn't pull over, not in the middle of nowhere. I just had to keep driving until I found somewhere with lights or people. A few miles later, I saw a sign for a rest stop 2 miles ahead. I decided that's where I'd go. I didn't know what I'd do once I got there, but I needed to get off the road. The lights behind me flickered for a second, like the driver had turned them off and then back on. But when they came back, they were closer than before. I pressed the gas harder. When I reached the rest stop exit, I turned quickly and pulled into the lot. It was small, with a few vending machines, a couple of parked trucks, and dim lights flickering above the bathrooms. I parked near the entrance and killed the engine. The car that had been following me didn't turn in. It drove right past the exit and kept going down the highway. I sat there for a while, breathing hard, my hands still gripping the wheel. I watched through the windshield as the taillights of that car faded into the distance until they disappeared completely. I told myself it was over, that maybe I'd overreacted. But then, as I sat there trying to calm down, I noticed something. There was a black SUV parked near the far end of the lot. Its lights were off, but I could see the faint outline of it under the weak lamp overhead. The windows were tinted dark, and I couldn't see inside. I didn't think much of it at first, assuming it was one of the truckers resting. But after a minute or two, I realized it wasn't running, and no one had gotten in or out. It was just sitting there, completely still. I decided to use the restroom before getting back on the road. The air outside was freezing. My footsteps crunched softly on the gravel as I walked toward the building. The light above the door flickered every few seconds, buzzing faintly. The bathroom itself was small and smelled like disinfectant and stale air. I washed my hands and stared at myself in the cracked mirror for a moment, trying to shake the unease in my stomach. When I stepped back outside, the lot looked different. The black SUV wasn't where it had been. It was gone. My heart skipped a beat. I looked around, scanning the lot, but I didn't see it anywhere. The only other vehicles were the two big trucks parked near the far end, their engines rumbling faintly. I started walking faster back toward my car. That's when I saw movement in the corner of my eye. Someone standing near my car. It was just a faint shape, silhouetted by the dim glow of the overhead light. They were near the back, bent slightly, like they were looking at something on the rear bumper. My pulse spiked. I froze for a second, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure straightened slowly, then turned and walked away toward the edge of the lot. They didn't run. They just walked calmly into the dark until I couldn't see them anymore. I got to my car fast and jumped inside, locking the doors immediately. I started the engine and turned the headlights on, sweeping them across the lot. Nothing. The person was gone. The only thing left was the faint mark of footprints in the gravel near my bumper. I didn't wait around to see more. I pulled out of the lot and got back on the highway, driving faster than I probably should have. I kept checking my mirrors, expecting to see headlights behind me again, but the road stayed empty. I didn't slow down until I reached the next town, a small place with a few lit storefronts and a diner still open. I pulled into a spot under a bright streetlight and finally let myself breathe. I stepped out to check the car, and that's when I saw it. On the back bumper, smeared across the dust, were the faint marks of fingers. Not prints from brushing by it, grips like someone had held onto it. There were also small scratches near the trunk latch, fresh and clean against the dirty paint. I stood there for a long moment, staring at them. That person at the rest stop hadn't just been looking at my car. They had been touching it, maybe trying to get inside. And whoever it was could have been the same one driving that car behind me earlier, following me all that way, waiting for me to stop. The thought made my stomach twist. I wiped the marks off with my sleeve, got back in, and locked the doors again. I stayed parked there for nearly an hour before I had the nerve to get back on the road. I made it home around 4 in the morning. The drive from that town was quiet, but I couldn't relax. Every time a pair of headlights appeared behind me, even far in the distance, my chest would tighten again. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a while, the engine still running, watching the road behind me. Nothing followed me after that. I never found out who was in that car or what they wanted. Maybe it was someone looking for trouble, maybe worse. All I know is that they were out there that night, following close enough to touch my car, waiting for the moment I stopped. Since then, I've never driven that route after dark again. And every time I see a car pulled over with its hazards on, I keep driving, because I can't stop thinking about that first one. The open door, the trunk up, the phone glowing on the seat. Someone had set that up to make people stop. And I think if I had pulled over that night, I probably wouldn't have made it home at all. It was around 11:40 at night when I started my drive home from a small town about 2 hours away. I had gone there earlier that day for some work and stayed later than planned. The streets in that town were empty by the time I left. Everything had that still, heavy feeling that comes when most people are asleep. The air felt cold through the open window, and the sound of my tires on the asphalt echoed against the quiet houses. Once I left the town limits, it was just me, the dark road, and the hum of my car. I always liked night drives before that night. There's something peaceful about empty roads and the glow of headlights stretching ahead. But that night didn't feel peaceful. The further I drove, the quieter everything seemed to get. Even the hum of the car felt muffled. The highway I took cut through a stretch of farmland, and for long stretches there were no streetlights at all, just darkness on both sides. My headlights carved out a narrow tunnel of light in front of me, and beyond that, there was nothing. I noticed early on that the gas gauge was lower than I thought. It was sitting just above a quarter tank. Normally that would have been fine for a 2-hour drive, but I hadn't filled up since morning, and I knew some of the stations on that route closed early. I figured I'd find one along the highway before it became an issue, but the farther I went, the more I realized how empty that route really was at night. Every few miles, I passed a darkened farmhouse or a small dirt road leading off somewhere, but no open stations, no traffic. After about an hour of driving, I noticed a single pair of headlights appear in my rearview mirror. They came up behind me fast, bright and steady. I thought it was just someone passing through, maybe heading the same way. The car stayed behind me at a consistent distance for a while. I didn't think much of it until I noticed they weren't trying to pass, even though the road was completely empty. The lights just stayed there, locked in my mirror. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was just coincidence. But after 20 minutes of seeing those same headlights trailing me, it started to feel strange. Every time I slowed a little, the car slowed too. Every time I sped up, the lights did the same. I told myself it was probably just another driver who felt safer following someone on that dark stretch of highway. But the feeling of being watched from behind started to crawl under my skin. I kept glancing at the mirror more often than I should have, and every time, those lights were still there, unwavering. I passed another exit sign, but the small towns it pointed to were miles off the main road, and I didn't want to risk turning somewhere isolated. The gas gauge had dipped just under a quarter by now, and my nerves were starting to get tight. I couldn't see the shape of the car behind me, just the brightness of its headlights flooding my mirrors. Another 10 minutes went by, then 20. It stayed behind me the whole time. No change in distance, no attempt to pass. I decided to take the next turn I saw and pull into somewhere public, maybe a gas station or even a 24-hour store, just to shake the feeling. When I saw a green sign ahead showing an exit for a rest area in 1 mile, I felt some relief. I slowed down and signaled to take the exit. The headlights behind me mirrored every movement. I pulled onto the ramp and they followed. The rest area came into view, a small lot with a few vending machines and a bathroom building. The lights in the lot were weak and flickered in patches. There were only 2 other vehicles parked there, both empty-looking. I parked near the vending machines, turned off the engine, and waited a moment, pretending to check my phone. The car that had been following me pulled in too. It slowed down as it entered the lot, then stopped a few spaces behind me. The engine stayed running. No one got out. I sat there in silence, my hands tight around the steering wheel. The hum of my car had stopped, but I could hear their engine idling faintly through the night. The glow from their headlights spread across the asphalt and brushed against the back of my car. I didn't want to get out, but sitting still made me more anxious. I looked at the fuel gauge again, low, but enough to make it to the next town if I didn't waste time. I started the car again and pulled out, pretending I hadn't noticed anything strange. The other car didn't move at first. I merged back onto the highway, and a minute later, I saw those headlights appear in my mirror again. They had followed. I could feel my heart start to pound harder. It didn't make sense. There was no reason for them to trail me that far, not for this long. I didn't want to panic, but I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't just keep driving until I ran out of gas. I checked my phone, no service. That stretch of road had dead zones, and of course I was in one. I tried to think of somewhere safe, but the next real town was still 30 miles ahead. I decided to try something different. Up ahead, there was a long curve in the road with a small service road branching off near the bend. I'd noticed it earlier that day. My plan was to take that turn quickly, cut my lights for a second, and see if the car would pass by. When I reached the curve, I slowed slightly, then turned onto the service road. I drove about 50 feet in and switched off my headlights. The darkness swallowed everything instantly. My hands were trembling slightly as I watched through the mirror. For a few seconds, I saw the glow of the headlights continue down the highway. Then they stopped. The car slowed, paused right where I had turned, and then turned onto the same service road. That was the moment I felt real fear. It wasn't a coincidence anymore. Whoever was behind that wheel was following me deliberately. I put the car back into gear and accelerated fast down the narrow gravel road. My tires kicked up dust, and the beam of my headlights bounced across the uneven ground. The service road led through an open field and then toward a patch of trees. Behind me, those headlights appeared again, bright and steady, bouncing in the same rhythm as mine. They were closer this time. The road ahead twisted slightly, and I followed it until I saw a small clearing where I could make a sharp turn and get back onto the main highway from the opposite direction. I hit the brakes, spun the wheel, and pushed the gas hard. My car fishtailed slightly but caught traction as I headed back toward the highway. The other car tried to follow but slowed down near the bend, like the driver wasn't expecting me to turn that fast. By the time I reached the highway again, I could barely see their headlights shrinking in the distance. I floored it, keeping my focus straight ahead. I didn't look back for several minutes, not until I reached a brighter stretch of road closer to the next town. When I finally glanced in the rearview mirror again, the road behind me was empty. I didn't see those lights again. I kept driving until I reached a gas station near the town's edge. It was brightly lit, a few cars parked out front, and I felt the tension in my chest finally start to loosen. I pulled in, filled up the tank, and stayed parked there for a long while, just watching the road. Every pair of headlights that appeared in the distance made me tense, but none of them slowed or followed. I got home around 2:30 in the morning. The roads were empty again, but this time the quiet didn't feel calm. It felt heavy. I kept thinking about that car, how long it stayed behind me, how it followed me into the rest stop, how it turned when I did. I tried to come up with an explanation. Maybe it was someone who thought I was following them first, or maybe they were lost or just playing some stupid game. But deep down, I knew it wasn't random. The way they matched every move, the way they stayed just close enough but never too close, it felt intentional. For weeks after that, I couldn't drive at night without checking my mirrors every few seconds. Even now, sometimes, when I see a pair of headlights behind me for too long, that same chill runs through me. It made me realize how small and exposed you really are on an empty road at night. Out there, in the dark, you never really know who's watching you or why. All it takes is one car, one set of headlights that just won't go away, and you start to understand how easily something ordinary can turn terrifying. It was almost 1 a.m. when I started my drive home that night. I had been out of town for work and decided to head back instead of staying at a motel. I wanted my own bed, my own shower, and the quiet comfort of home. The GPS said I had just over 3 hours to go. The weather had been fine all day, but by the time I got on the highway, a heavy fog had rolled in. It wasn't thick enough to make me pull over, but it made everything feel different, muted and distant. The lights from passing signs looked soft and blurry, and the edges of the road disappeared into gray. The traffic was gone. I might have seen 1 or 2 cars in the first half hour, but after that, it was just me. I had the heater running low, and the faint hum of the tires filled the silence. I remember thinking how easy it would be to fall asleep at the wheel when everything around you looks the same. There's something hypnotic about night driving. Your headlights showing you only a few meters ahead, the same dark road stretching forever. I was somewhere between 2 small towns when I noticed how low my gas was. I had about 1/8 of a tank left. I should have filled up earlier, but I'd been too focused on getting home. I started looking for signs of a gas station, but for miles, there was nothing, just dark trees and long stretches of empty road. I kept checking the gauge, hoping maybe I'd find a small 24-hour place before I ran out. After about 20 more minutes, I finally saw a dim light in the distance. It looked like a small gas station, old and worn out. The sign above the pumps didn't even light up properly. Half the letters were missing or flickering. I pulled in and parked next to one of the pumps. There was only one other car there, a dark SUV parked on the far side. It looked empty, but its engine was running, which I thought was strange. The building itself looked like something from another time. The windows were dark, but there was a faint glow coming from inside, like a small lamp or a TV. There wasn't a sound anywhere, no insects, no wind, nothing. Just the low hum of my car engine and the steady ticking of the cooling metal as I shut it off. I stepped out and tried my card at the pump, but it wouldn't take it. The small screen just said, "See attendant." I looked toward the building and saw a small open sign in the window, flickering like it was struggling to stay lit. I didn't want to, but I knew I had to go inside if I wanted to make it home. As I walked toward the door, I kept glancing at that SUV. The windows were tinted dark, and I couldn't see if anyone was in it. The exhaust was coming out in little white clouds in the cold air. Something about it made me uneasy, quickened my pace, and went inside. The bell above the door didn't ring when I entered. The air inside was stale, smelling faintly of old coffee and dust. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, a few of them flickering. The shelves were mostly empty, just a few dusty bags of chips, some motor oil and cleaning rags. There was a counter at the back with a register, but no one was standing there. I looked around, waiting for someone to appear. The place felt wrong. Too quiet, too still. There was an old clock on the wall that ticked unevenly, the second hand jumping every few beats. The only other sound I could hear was the faint hum of a small fridge near the back. I waited a minute, then leaned over the counter slightly. There was a half-empty coffee cup sitting there, and behind the counter, I could see a small door slightly ajar leading to what looked like a storage room. I didn't want to call out. It didn't feel right to break the silence in a place like that. I just stood there, staring at the open door, listening. After another minute of standing there, I gave up and decided to leave. I figured I'd just drive to the next town, even if it meant running on fumes. But as I turned to go, I froze. Through the front window, I could see the SUV's driver's side door was now open. The engine was still running, but I didn't see anyone standing outside. I hadn't heard it open. I hadn't heard any movement at all. The fog was thicker now, curling around the car and the gas pumps, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. I stayed still for a few seconds, trying to listen for any sound, footsteps, a voice, anything. But there was nothing, just the low hum of that idling engine and the faint buzz of the lights overhead. I didn't know why, but I felt a strong urge not to walk back to my car yet. Something told me to wait. I slowly backed up toward the counter again and crouched a little so I could look through the bottom of the window without being too visible. The fog made everything look ghostly and distant. The SUV door was still open. I couldn't see anyone moving around it, but there was a faint shape near the back, close to the trunk. It looked like someone crouching. I stayed there, watching for maybe a full minute, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The shape didn't move much, just slow, deliberate motions like they were doing something near the back of the car. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a soft metallic sound, like a trunk latch clicking. The shape stood up. I ducked down fast, pressing myself against the counter. I could feel my hands shaking. I stayed completely still, listening. I heard slow, heavy footsteps on the pavement outside, moving closer. The sound stopped near the front door. I held my breath, afraid even the smallest sound might give me away. A few seconds later, the door creaked. It didn't open all the way, just enough for cold air to slip in. The bell above the door still didn't ring. I could see the edge of a dark coat through the small crack between the door and the frame. Whoever it was didn't come in right away, they just stood there. After what felt like forever, the door closed again. I didn't move. I stayed crouched there for another full minute before I dared to peek over the counter. The SUV's door was closed again now, and I couldn't see anyone outside. But the unease didn't leave me. I decided right then that I wasn't going to stay another second. I crept toward the door, trying to stay as quiet as possible. When I stepped outside, the fog swallowed me instantly. I could barely see the hood of my car. The SUV was still there, idling, its headlights off. I couldn't see if anyone was inside. I unlocked my car as quietly as I could, climbed in, and started it. My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. The moment my engine turned over, I saw movement. The SUV's brake lights flashed red. I didn't wait. I threw the car into reverse and sped out of the lot, gravel flying behind me. When I got back onto the highway, I pushed the gas pedal down as far as I could. The fog was so thick I could barely see, but I didn't care. My heart was pounding, my pulse racing in my ears. After about a minute, I checked my rearview mirror. First, I didn't see anything. Then, faintly through the fog, a pair of headlights appeared behind me. They stayed there, matching my speed perfectly. I tried slowing down. The lights slowed too. I sped up, they did the same. Every time I glanced in the mirror, they were there, just far enough to stay out of full view. This went on for at least 15 minutes. My stomach was in knots. I didn't know what to do. The fog was too thick to risk turning off anywhere. There were no exits, no lights, nothing but that endless dark road and those headlights sticking to me like glue. Finally, I saw the lights of a small town ahead, a glowing sign and a few street lamps breaking through the fog. I pulled off the highway fast and drove into the first open parking lot I saw, a 24-hour diner with a few cars out front. I parked right under one of the bright lights and shut the engine off. The headlights behind me kept coming down the highway but didn't turn off. They passed the exit and disappeared into the fog. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the steering wheel, trying to calm down. I didn't go inside the diner. I didn't even move. I waited until the shaking in my hands stopped, then finally drove home. When I checked the news a few days later, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A small gas station along that same highway had been closed off by police. The owner had gone missing, and they had found a vehicle abandoned nearby, a dark SUV, with blood inside the trunk. I never took that route again after that. Every time I drive late at night now, I make sure my tank is full before I leave. I don't stop at lonely gas stations, and I don't trust quiet places that feel too still. Because now I know how easy it is for something to look completely normal until it's too late. That night I was lucky. I left just in time. Someone else didn't. It was late, somewhere around 1:30 in the morning, when I started my drive home. I had spent the evening at my cousin's house helping him move furniture, and by the time we finished, it was already well past midnight. He offered me to stay the night, but I just wanted to sleep in my own bed. The drive home wasn't that long, about an hour and a half, but most of it went through open country roads surrounded by empty fields and patches of forest. I didn't think much about it when I left. I just wanted to get home. The night air was cold, and a thin mist hung low across the road. It wasn't thick enough to block my view, but it made everything look softer, quieter. The only sound was the hum of my engine and the faint whistle of the wind when I cracked the window open. My headlights stretched out ahead in two long beams, cutting through the dark. There were no other cars, no streetlights, nothing but the endless black ribbon of road disappearing into nothing. About 20 minutes into the drive, I passed a small town. A few gas stations, a closed diner, a couple of houses with lights off. After that, there was nothing. Just long stretches of empty highway and flat land. The kind of road where if your car broke down, you might not see anyone for hours. The drive was peaceful at first. I had some low music playing, just to fill the silence. But after a while, I noticed how heavy my eyelids felt. The rhythm of the tires on the pavement, the repetition of white lines flashing past. It was like a lullaby trying to pull me under. I rolled the window down wider, letting the cold air sting my face. It helped for a while. Then I saw something strange on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was a deer, but as I got closer, I realized it was a person. A man, standing near the edge of the pavement, facing away from the road. He was wearing a light-colored hoodie and jeans, and he wasn't moving. He didn't even flinch when my headlights passed over him. I slowed down instinctively, wondering if maybe he needed help, but something about the way he stood, completely still, head slightly down, made my stomach tighten. I drove past without stopping. My mirror caught a quick glimpse of him as I passed, and it looked like he had turned slightly toward the road, but I didn't slow down to check. I kept driving, my pulse speeding up. I tried to tell myself it wasn't that strange. People break down, people walk late at night, but there were no cars parked nearby, no lights, no houses for miles. I told myself to forget it, but about 10 minutes later, I saw another figure ahead. This one was sitting on the guardrail, facing the trees. My first thought was that it couldn't be the same person. This one looked smaller, maybe younger. The same kind of light clothing, though. I drove past without looking directly at them, keeping my eyes on the road, but I could feel the hair on my neck stand up. Something about the whole drive started to feel wrong after that. The road that had seemed peaceful before now felt endless and empty in a way that made me nervous. The music didn't help anymore. I turned it off and just listened to the car and the road. Then, not long after passing that second figure, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. They were far back at first, just two small lights floating in the dark, but I hadn't seen another vehicle since leaving the town. I kept glancing at them, thinking maybe it was another late-night driver, but something about them felt off. They didn't seem to gain distance or fall back. They just stayed the same, hovering behind me at a steady distance. I slowed down a little to see if they'd pass me. They didn't. I sped up slightly, and so did they. That's when I realized whoever was behind me was matching my speed. My hands tightened on the wheel. I kept telling myself not to panic, that maybe it was just a coincidence, but every mile that passed made it harder to believe that. The lights followed every curve, every small change in speed. The road ahead stayed empty, the fog growing thicker, and those headlights stayed locked in behind me like a shadow that wouldn't go away. After a few miles, I saw a sign for a rest area about 5 miles ahead. I figured I'd pull in, just to get off the road and see what they did. I didn't like the idea of stopping alone in the middle of nowhere, but I didn't like being followed even more. The drive to that rest stop felt like it lasted an hour. Every few seconds, I checked the mirror, hoping the lights would disappear, but they never did. When I finally saw the rest area, I pulled in fast, taking a spot near the lights. There were 2 vending machines and a single dim light over a small restroom building. The parking lot was completely empty. I killed the engine and looked back down the road. The headlights didn't follow. They kept going straight. I sat there, watching the glow of them fade into the fog until they were gone completely. For a few seconds, I felt relief so strong it made my hands shake. But that feeling didn't last long. When I looked around the rest area again, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. There was a car parked on the far edge of the lot that I hadn't seen when I pulled in. It was dark, an old, boxy sedan with no lights on. At first, I thought maybe someone was asleep inside, but as I squinted through the fog, I could see the outline of someone sitting upright in the driver's seat. They weren't moving. The longer I stared, the worse it felt. I couldn't see their face, but I could tell they were facing my direction. I didn't know if they were looking at me, but it felt like they were. I started my car again. The sound of the engine broke the silence, and immediately, the headlights on that parked car flicked on. My heart jumped. I didn't wait. I threw the car into reverse, backed out fast, and pulled back onto the highway. When I looked in my rearview mirror, those same headlights were behind me again. The same distance, the same steady pace. I pressed harder on the gas. The speedometer climbed, but the lights behind me stayed. I tried switching lanes a few times, but they followed every move. There was nowhere to go, no exits, no gas stations, just endless road. My chest was tight, my hands sweating on the wheel. Every second felt stretched out, the silence inside my car deafening. At one point, the road curved slightly, and I used that chance to try and lose them. I turned off my headlights for a few seconds, hoping the fog would hide me long enough to pull over behind a small patch of trees I saw on the right. I killed the engine and waited in the dark. For almost a full minute, I sat completely still, barely breathing. Then, faintly through the fog, I saw the other car's headlights pass by slowly, not more than 50 feet ahead. They moved past, continued down the road, and disappeared. I waited another minute before starting my car again. My heart was still hammering, but I told myself I was okay now, that I'd lost them. I got back onto the highway, driving slower this time, checking the mirrors every few seconds. For a while, the road stayed empty again. No lights, no shapes, no movement. Then, out of nowhere, I saw something that made my stomach drop. On the right side of the road, near a bend, was a car pulled halfway into the ditch. Its hood popped open, hazard lights flashing weakly. As I got closer, my blood went cold. It was the same car from the rest area. I didn't even think. I hit the gas and sped past, not daring to look back. The last half hour of that drive felt like a blur. I didn't see any more cars, didn't see any signs of anyone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every shadow looked like it was hiding someone. Every bend in the road felt like a trap. When I finally saw the first familiar streetlights of my town, I almost cried with relief. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat there for a long time with the engine off, staring into the dark. I checked the street behind me over and over, making sure no one was there. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I checked the local news online that night and found a small story buried halfway down the page. A man had been found dead near an old rest stop on that same stretch of road. His car had been left running, and police said it looked like he had pulled over to help someone. They didn't release any details, but when they showed the photo of the area, I recognized it instantly. It was the same rest stop where I had seen that dark car. I've done a lot of night drives in my life, but that one changed something in me. I don't stop for anyone anymore. I don't pull into empty rest areas, and I never ignore that gut feeling when something feels wrong. Because I'm sure now that the person I saw that night wasn't broken down or lost. They were waiting, and if I had stopped, I don't think I'd be here to tell the story.